All right, shows us live. Going. Good. All right, Smithville Board of Alderman work session is now called to order. Chuck, take it away.
Thank you. All right, so good evening, Mayor and Board. I'm Chuck Souls. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Smithville. We're here tonight to present to you our combined Parks and Rec and Public Works Operations Facility. Matt and I are going to provide a brief introduction, and then we'll have our consultant team, Darren Ammon, who's here with Bartlett West, and Daylin Novak with SKWF. We'll take you through the proposed facility design. So first, I think a lot of you are familiar with and aware. Oh, sorry. Talking to the mic. I think a lot of you are familiar with and aware of where the street department's operations are located. They're here off of Helvey Drive with our water department, and our Parks and Rec department are up here off of DD Highway in the Smithville or Smith Fork Park area. All right, so this thing is in the way for you guys to see that. There we go. Then we'll move him over here. Okay, so what we've looked at is a proposed combined Parks and Rec department with our Public Works Streets Division at the existing site of the Parks Department on the Smith Forks Park site on the core land. So let me briefly describe the process we went through. Obviously, we had consultant interviews. We had a selection committee. Alderman Atkins was part of that selection committee. Back in July, we went ahead and we awarded the contract to Bartlett West and SKWF. We went through several meetings with them. They came down and visited our operations. We visited a couple other facilities that had operations such as ours. And we looked at ideas, efficiencies, and their sites. We also met with our department staffs, operational staffs on both departments to find out what they thought our needs were. And we held several meetings after that. We looked at the facility, site layouts, concepts, as well as access and yard operations. So why is this needed? So the water plant needs to expand its capacity in the next couple of years. That's in our master plan and in our CIP to accommodate the growing community here, and to update the water treatment process. So the street division has to relocate. They won't have enough room for their operations when that expansion occurs. We don't have enough storage for our sand and salt and our sand salt mixes for winter operations. We have a lot of equipment, and it's expensive equipment that we have stored outside. The weather conditions make for additional maintenance, and they reduce the longevity of the equipment's life. The street manager's office is not located with our operational staff. We have two facilities on that site. The street manager's office and then the operations facilities are on the back end of the site. The crew operations area doesn't even have sanitation facilities. The sanitation facilities that are provided include a small area with a restroom, and it's both male and female, and the urinal and the locker room. There's no shower. They don't really have an area to take breaks except in the same area that we have maintenance equipment. We have no place for training for our staff. So with that, I'm going to be turning it over to Matt, but I just wanted to say one more comment. For a community the size of Smithville, a facility such as the one that's being proposed to support the services desired of our residents for street maintenance and for the development of a parks master plan and Smith Fork Park into a regional and destination park, we need a facility like this. Combining the operations of parks and streets provides efficiencies for staff, operations, facilities, and equipment. I'm going to turn it over to Matt. He'll talk about the Park Master Plan and some needs of the Parks Department.
Hey, everybody. So the city completed the Parks and Rec Master Plan in July of 2021 to help with the next 10 years of our department. As outlined in the master plan, Smiths Fork is a major component of the community oasis. To implement these enhancements to the park, the department will require more staff, equipment, and working area to maintain these improvements. In order to continue to accommodate the future improvements outlined in the Parks Master Plan, a new facility would be necessary for additional staffing, program services, and maintenance equipment. In 2017, a second office and break room were constructed in the existing Parks and Rec maintenance building. These offices are currently filled and there's no more room for expansion. As mentioned in the Parks Master Plan, the department will be adding 2 more staff members that will need permanent and appropriate working spaces in the short term. So the goal for Smiths Fork Park and the newly proposed building is to greatly improve our recreational services to the community. The new facility will enhance the entrance to the park. Visitors of the park will be able to rent sports equipment, kayaks, and other materials throughout the year. Currently, all parks reservations are done online because the Parks and Rec building is not open to the public. Equipment rentals and activity supplies must be picked up at City Hall due to the inability for the public to enter the building. So to conclude, this is a great benefit to the community and will improve the overall customer service and their experience in the park users as outlined in the Parks Master Plan that we planned for. Thank you.
Thanks.
The next one's the plan, if you want to show us real quick.
Yeah, so I can go over this again. So yeah, this is the parks concept for Smiths Fork Park. So as you see, there's many enhancements that can be made over the next 10 years if doable. But making this public works and Parks and Rec building right there at the center of the park, this is just the great benefit this could bring to the community oasis, and having everything close to site for these improvements will greatly benefit this. So thank you.
Mayor, Board, Darren Ammon with Bartlett and West. This is Daylin Novak with WSKF Architects. We're teaming on this, and as Chuck mentioned a little bit about the selection process, we were selected to work on the Parks and Recreation plan. We're going to be talking on a little bit about in front of you today.
Hang on one second. Dan, can you hear him okay?
Yes, Mayor, I can hear him just fine.
Okay, just making sure.
Is that okay? Is that good?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so we got a few slides. We're going to go over a few things because we want to make sure you understand the process that we've went through. Chuck touched upon some of the things, but again, this wasn't done in a vacuum, and it's happened over the course of multiple months here. So some of those things listed up there. Our team has came out, again, architects, engineers, civil, structural, a bunch of folks came to the site and looked at the existing facilities that Chuck and Matt had mentioned. We've had multiple meetings with the staff to understand some of their needs, and Daylin can expand a little bit more on the process for some of the programming that we did, which was really understanding what equipment do you have? What's your offices look like today? What do you want them to look like in the future? All of those different things were taken into account when we started to think about what facility can the city of Smithville put together for not only the needs to be met today, but a vision for the long-term future. And you've seen the master plan that was up there for Smiths Forks. A lot of cool things planned. We want this to represent a good maintenance facility to take care of those future plans, both today and tomorrow. So what we've done to this point has been concepts, basically an understanding of what is out there today, the existing facilities, putting together a program to understand what you need, and then taking it to a schematic design. Future steps would be design development and construction design, where we would get bids and things like that so you could construct the facility. But we've got to the schematic design phase today. And coming up here in a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about some phasing considerations and some of the costs that are associated with that. Turn it over to Daylin here to talk a little bit about the building specifically.
Good evening. Thanks for having us come talk to you guys tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about the building and how we got there. We mentioned a programming exercise that we had, and that's this right here, and we can pass it around if you're interested, but it's quite a few pages, and we go through every single room in the space that is needed now, but not just now, but also for 20 to 30 years down the road. We don't want to build this facility and then tomorrow it's undersized. I'm going to plan accordingly so that you can build for the future and that kind of thing, because Smithville really is a growing community. So I'm going to go through, I guess with this document, so I explain a little bit more. There's like lobby administration section. There's a space for like the meeting areas, and then the vehicle storage that you see on the plan here too. So it goes into a lot of detail, and then we add in square footage in terms of like for the corridors and the exterior walls and all that. So it gives us kind of an idea of what the square footage will be prior to starting to lay out the floor plan. So on the screen there, you'll see the floor plan that we've come up with as schematic design. This is not the first option. We went through quite a few options. The first options actually included where the office building was very close to where the Parks and Rec building is now, with the vehicle storage back behind it. And through all the process, it just made more sense for the buildings to be combined so that the facility could be used by all of the staff and not have to duplicate facilities at both of the two buildings. So here we have, it's a pre-engineered metal building. There's really two buildings in one. You can see the larger building on the top side of the drawing there. Parks and Rec and Public Works both have the two different colored vehicles shown in that. So you can see we're locating all of their equipment that needs to be in the building there. That also brings back to the programming document. We got lists of all of the equipment for Public Works and Parks and Rec. And they told us what should be stored inside, what really should be stored inside, what can be stored outside, and what needs to be stored outside under cover. So there was all those requirements. And so we show the size of those vehicles, make sure it all fits. And that's how we came up with the size of that northern portion of the building there. That's about 12,800 square feet in that vehicle storage space. Then the lower part is the office building, which we color coordinated so that you could see the spaces much more easily. The red right in the center is where you'd come into the facility with a vestibule and a lobby space. And there'd be as a receptionist there waiting for you if you were the public coming in. There's a conference room and a meeting room off to the left of that main entry then. And those two rooms can be combined into one space to provide for larger meetings. Community coming out there, I know community engagement's really large here, it's really important. Then there's also an outdoor space to the far right side there that can be used for community meetings, coaches meetings, staff break, training, any kind of things, that Public Works and Parks and Rec need, especially with COVID right now. Everybody likes being outside a little bit more. So that's a covered space that could be used for that. The area in blue is all of the offices for both Public Works and Parks and Rec. You'll see that there's just really one space, and they're going to be sharing that between both departments together. There's open offices in the center, and then some of the leadership people are along the outside space. All of the yellow spaces are support spaces, and then like things like mechanical spaces, water, electrical rooms, those kind of things, janitor's closets. And then the green spaces are all the locker rooms and restrooms for the staff. And again, the people that are working Parks and Rec and Public Works out in the field, they'll come back and have lunch here too, in that large meeting room that's in red in that lower right-hand corner. So it kind of gives you an idea. Again, we'll show you some images of what it looks like, but this is kind of the floor plan that made the most sense for Parks and Rec and Public Works. So we just click the button here. Okay, so this is, I'm going to show you two images of what we envision the building looking like. Again, there's two pre-engineered metal buildings put together, both single slope roofs. And you can see the taller one is the vehicle storage building. And there's a polycarbonate panel, which is, it lets daylight in. So you'll have daylight in that vehicle storage area, which trying really hard to think about health and wellness of all your workers as well. And then we've got the front entry kind of highlighted here. We're using the metal building panels that are provided by a pre-engineered metal building, which are standard metal panels, but then also some horizontal green accent panels as well, which would be provided by a different company. The brown that you see there could be a Nichiha panel, which is a fiber cement board panel. It could look like wood. There's other options that we could look at as well. But to give those like that main entry an accent to kind of draw people in. There's also the signage there for the city of Smithville. And we're showing the overhead door, like a coiling door for where the equipment could be checked out. It's very much like a sore thumb right now, I think, sticking out. That could blend in. We could make it match and that kind of thing. So it's not so bright. You'll also see in this image that there's a decent amount of grade change between that existing road that's out there and where the building needs to be sited to make the grading work for the site. And we'll show you some site plans here in a little bit as well. But this is just one of those images. And I'll show you the other one here too. So this is kind of from that other direction. It's focused more on that outdoor space that's right by the meeting room. There is a little screen wall there that blocks mechanical equipment and that kind of thing from everybody's view. And you could see one of the overhead doors on the vehicle storage building that will be shown. So, okay, Darren.
Thanks, Daylin.
Yep.
Just to add, maybe before we go through some of these next slides on the site a little bit, the team thought a long-term about the sustainability and different things like that within the building and how this could work again for staff that's there today and yet growing staff. So all of that was taken into account when we were thinking about all of these different things. So just wanted to make sure we pointed that out, that was very important when thinking about the process. So the next few slides, again, I'm not going to go through this in extreme detail because we've got the highlights on the left side, but we wanted to make sure everybody kind of understood where we were at in terms of potential phases, costs, and how this site is going to be laid out. So everything could be built in one phase, but we do understand you, along with a lot of other municipalities around the country, don't have one big open checkbook to just do all things at once. So we thought about how things can be planned if it was done in different phases, and that's what these slides are going to talk a little bit about. So, and if the mouse points on here, I can help explain this a little bit. So one of the things to think about, this is the combined facility of the office and the Parks and Rec vehicles in the back over here. That would be built in the first phase because that is the main structure to help with what we're talking about. North is up on this plan, just again, getting everybody oriented. And here's the road out here leading into the park. This facility over here would be a covered parking structure. So it would be open on this side over here. So vehicles would still be covered, but they could pull in and out as necessary. Again, there was a lot of other equipment that it helps for the longevity of those vehicles to not be pounded on by rain and snow. So they would be covered. So that facility would also be built. And this location over here is a new salt structure. So again, to get you oriented a little bit, this is the existing building that's out there right now for Parks and Rec. And then there's another building over here, which has some lines through it that would be demolished. That, if you've went out there, is the storage facility that has the lawnmower that can't get through the door. So the back portion sticks out, the tractor's in so that it's protected. But that building, again, a lot of thought was, you may be thinking, well, why are we demolishing buildings and adding more? Our structural engineer took a look at that, and a lot of different things came into play, thinking out how can this be the most efficient site, again, for the long term. It just made sense, as I explained a couple of these other things, for that building to go away. It wasn't a lot of value in what they were using in it. And then it would help make, again, the long-term plan for this function a little bit better. So the 3 darker blue buildings would be built in the first phase. All of the site work and utilities would be brought in to facilitate these day one. So what does that mean? So there's going to be some other slides coming up that show some additions to buildings, but we would do all of the earthwork, all of the grading, bring your sewer, all of that within the site over here to get that all done in one phase so that other things could be added. Because when you're moving earth, it's much more efficient to move it all at one time and plan for the future than to try to have mobilization costs to do that multiple different times. So also mention that this facility would be demolished. And when you start talking dollars and cents, so what we're going to see down here, Daylin's going to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the construction estimates, and she's done a great job putting this together. We spent a lot of time, and right now prices are all over the board when it comes to materials, how quick you can get them and so forth. But the estimate for this phase is about $7.4 million. And you'll see we have design fees for our team to do that on there as well. That is design fees. It doesn't include the construction administration within that portion because that would be done hourly depending on when things would be done. But that's phase 1. I'm sure you're going to have questions, but as you flip through here, you'll see there's going to be some colors added. We go to the next slide. This could be a potential phase two, or again, all done in one phase. This would add this area up in orange here to the north, which is a covered structure. Again, thinking that would be open onto the building, but it would be concrete, and get the word out there, concrete surface where we could park more vehicles on that, provide more covered spaces. It would be a great work area for staff to use that.
I think
This,
also, just to note, I'm sorry,
ahead.
but there's a possibility in the future that you could enclose that space too. When we plan for it, we are planning so that all the utilities and things could be planned to move into that space and not make it more challenging later on. So that's something we are planning for as well.
yeah, good point. Thank you. And then within this phase, again, there would be some thought to actually doing a renovation of this existing Parks and Rec office and shop up in this location, such as there's the ability on the north side of this to have a wash bay there. But as of right now, that doesn't function as a wash bay. And with the new facility being in place, that would be something that they could have, plus some renovated space. So doing some of that. And then over here, we've heard from Matt and Parks and Rec that having additional parking would be important for soccer games, as well as to help facilitate staff parking. This is the north half of an overall plan. This would be future. So doing some of that parking, putting a couple islands in here, getting some trees out there, because it's pretty much an oasis of asphalt at this point. That would be done. And you can see the construction cost estimate for the orange is about 1.5 million. And then the associated design fees. We go to the third slide, which kind of buttons this all up to what would the long-term plan be if everything was done at one time. There'd be some new spreader racks to hang salt spreaders and so forth in this location here by my cursor. The salt brine tank could be added at that time in this location here. And then the green, that's all within the site on this side, in phase one is planned to be a gravel surface. Only some of the surfaces were selected out that were most important to be done in a concrete pavement, but then the future would be to do everything in a concrete pavement. Why maybe did we talk about that as a phase? Because pavement's very expensive and this is a substantial amount of pavement. So we broke that out, picked the most important areas for phase one and had this as a long-term plan. Again, could be done day one. It's really a dollars and cents item for the most part, but would be planned with utilities and drainage to be able to be put in at a future time. And then the last item is this south half of the parking lot added at that time. And again, associated construction costs and design fees, about $1 million for the construction estimate for that. Again, a lot of pavement is basically what's in this last phase for the most part. Glad to answer some more questions about some of that here, but we've got a couple more slides to go through to kind of get you through the whole package, and then we can go from there. So Baylen's going to talk a little more about this.
So when we do cost estimating, we go into a lot of detail. I just don't do, this is square footage cost generally for this type of building. So we're showing you just the overall summary page, but this document's 20 pages long. We go into the quantities and takeoffs of every single item that's going to be planned for this facility as we see it right now. We're in schematic design, so there's still a lot of things that need to be figured out, and things could change a bit, with the design of it as we get farther in. But right now, what we're going to show you, and these are color coordinated that match the colors that were on the site plans that Darren just talked about. So you can see there's phase one in blue, phase two is in orange, and then green for phase three. And so I know it's probably a little bit challenging to see all this. There's a lot of text in here, but we did break it down in terms of that. About $7.5 million, the building cost versus the site cost. We also look at the overhead cost for the contractor, as well as the fees that the contractor will put on it, performance and payment bonding. And then we have a contingency added on top of that. Again, as I mentioned, this is in schematic design phase, so there's a lot of unknowns still. We haven't dug into the details of everything yet. Doing, all the making sure everything's going to work and coordinate the way it needs to between all of our different trades. So the contingency at this point is at 20%. Now that number's not just going to disappear, unfortunately for you, because you'd love to have it just disappear, but that actually ends up then getting put into the cost estimate and moves up into the numbers and ends up being part of that because we just haven't gotten to that detail level yet. At the end, when we bid it with a contractor, it's typically at 5% because we don't know everything that's going on. And as Darren mentioned, construction right now is crazy. Costs are almost impossible to estimate. And so we're trying to be cautious on this with you guys. And we also have escalation figured out. So we used to estimate 3 to 5% a year. Well, right now we're looking at like 6 to 8% because we don't know what's going on. And it's never going to go back to where it was. It will go down probably a little bit, but it's never going to go back to where it was before COVID and everything else. So we're estimating 6% per year. So phase one, I'm estimating for 2023 construction. Phase two is estimated for 2024 and did I say phase two? I'm sorry. Phase two is in 2024. Phase three would be in 2025. And I understand that could be farther out than that, but we're trying to give you an idea of what that might be in terms of cost. So when I say 6% too, that's 6% compounded. So it's 6% for 2023, 6% for 2024, and then it's added all together, if that makes sense. Also, then it's subtotaled there at the end, and there's square footage numbers overall for the entire site and building. So like, for example, phase one, which had quite a bit of building work, is at $247 a square foot. And for the site, it's about 121. But note that that's for all the buildings that we're talking about. They're underneath that, underneath the blue, it says administration main building, which is that would be the office building part of it. So that's at $333 a square foot cost right now. Whereas the main building, that's part of the indoor vehicle storage, that's at $163 a square foot. And then the covered outdoor parking would be closer to $92 a square foot. So I like to see those numbers to make sure that they seem generally in range of where they should be falling for this schematic design phase. And then also you can see down there at the very bottom is the total cost if all three phases were to be done at this time. Also, of course, if you were to do, some of this work all together instead of phasing it out like this, that 6% would be taken out. So there'd be less of that cost because you're trying to do it all at once. So that's also something to think about. What do we need to? Yep. No problem. Okay.
Strategically had that plan to cover the overall.
Yeah, it wasn't, I didn't notice it was covering it. Okay, so the total number was 10 million, about $63,000. This slide is of some design alternates that could be included in the different phases as well. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here, but you can see we got the blue, orange, and green again with the 3 different phases. So for example, the first one is a vehicle exhaust system. So if we were to do a more extensive vehicle exhaust system, which is called AirVac 911, we do a lot in facilities that are like this, where vehicles are coming and going a lot with exhaust. It just, again, health and wellness for your people. We have planned a whole bay exhaust system, but this is something that we would recommend on top of that. It's a filtration system. You change out the filters a couple times a year. So that's one example of those items. You can see there's other items here too, but again, just trying to give you options in terms of, how to make this project work for the city, because money is tight everywhere. So. Okay. And then Darren.
So to finish this up, just a couple more things, a couple of last slides, and then we'll be more than happy to answer any questions. There's a couple additional alternates that we put in there. One of the items that came up within our team discussion was to rebuild the drive or the street from the road all the way down to the restroom area, which is highlighted in yellow. I get the cursor in this location here. So that would make that, instead of just an asphalt overlay with no curb and gutter, this would be more like a street with curb and gutter, sidewalk running along there, drainage and inlets and everything. And you can see the design fee to do that. That would enhance the entrance to the park greatly. So something for consideration. And there's an associated cost for that, roughly 450,000, whether you wanted to do asphalt or concrete. So that's an option. Again, as Dalen mentioned, lots of different options to consider. And then the last thing, from our perspective, this is something that we think should strongly be considered to be done immediately in the first phase, but we did break it out as an alternate. So one of the things that's a little bit interesting out there is the city water is not right in front of the facility. It's actually a rural water line. And there is a 3-inch line that goes back and serves the restroom right now. Well, regardless, in phase one, that would be upgraded in order to provide fire suppression service to the building. But that could be done off of the rural water line, but there is an associated cost with taps and other things we would have to go through to have that served from that rural water district. So when we've looked at that, over here to the left is the existing connection to the city service. So one of the thoughts would be now might be the time to go ahead and bring city water service all the way out here to this location, and then this new line, instead of having the additional main beyond the rural water district, it would all be city water. We think that makes a lot of sense long-term to do this with the construction, and the additional cost of that is roughly about $84,000. We'd run that in the right of way, so that we wouldn't have to get any additional easements, but then the additional design work to put that together and get approval as well. So something, again, food for thought. And you can see up there, that's about 1,200 lineal feet. That's the yellow area along the road. So there is quite a bit of distance there to do that. That is the end of our slides, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or we could flip back to another slide if you had specific questions on any of the sites, the costs, and I don't know, Chuck or Matt, if you wanted to add a couple of things as well. So go
I
ahead.
just wanted to let the board know, you can see from all the different schematics and stuff, and I'm gonna run back. We'll go off this one. We didn't just look at what we needed for the facility. We looked at what we could do for the, sorry. We looked at what we could do also for the community in developing this park at Smith Forest Park with the potential for the new road. We were also gonna tie, Darren mentioned a sidewalk. We were gonna put a 10-foot trail, goes from basically the restroom all the way and ties into the Main Street Trail. The water line, we would propose an 8-inch line up through here that would provide water for sprinkling and irrigation of all the sports fields out there and potential concession stands. The meeting room access would be open to the public for teams, also for meeting rooms. The access for the kayaks, and I keep telling Matt jet skis that he's gonna rent out of there, which I'm hoping he does. We got lots of storage area, but we looked at the future too with the salt brine area. That's something that Smithville doesn't do right now for treating the pre-treatment of city streets. We didn't go overboard on staffing. I think when we looked at this, we thought we'd probably have another individual or two in the streets, and this is 10+ years out. We probably need some people to do construction inspection that we'd house out here, and as well as Matt would need some additional staff to maintain and direct and take reservations and all these facilities. So we didn't just look at what do we need and what can we get. We looked at what we could do for this community and provide a great facility that would support the development of this park. And I have to apologize. I didn't introduce Alan Jensen is here today. He's our street division manager. For those of you who didn't know, he's a main player in this as well, as he'll be officed out here as well. And we looked at the other main thing that I was looking at is employee satisfaction and employee morale. The facilities that the guys are working in now, they come to work and they work and they do a great job. But I don't think it's anything that they're super proud of. I'm just being honest. It's a facility, does the job, but they come to work and they leave. So it's not something that they hang around afterwards, or they get great thrill in coming in every day to sit down with the street sweeper and eat their lunch. And the other thing I wanted to mention is in the staff report, I did allude to when we preliminarily started talking about this with the Corps, it seemed that there wasn't any issues with the type of facility we were proposing. And then later on in a different meeting, I met with Derek Dorsey, and he suggested that with the change in leadership, they might be talking about what is the benefit to the Corps for like having other operations other than park operations on their property. Friday, I got an email from Derek Dorsey, a park manager for Smithville Lake. Their real estate and their operations divisions have reviewed it, and they don't see any issues with the proposed facility. And they are sending it forward to the real estate office to start development of a modification to our lease agreement out there. So we should be good to proceed. We would like to get started on this. It'll take 6 to 9 months to get this designed. And then obviously the board's got a lot of decisions to make. But just to get this started, and it's gonna take the Corps probably 10 months to get this lease agreement done. I think I was telling Matt today. Maybe it was Darren I was telling today. On the raw water pump station, we still don't have the easement for the new water lines out there. They're building, and this has been 2 years in the making to get the easements through their real estate office. So they've approved it. We just don't have the physical paperwork. So it takes a long time to get through the Corps. But with a 6 to 9 month kind of design time, we'd be right in line with that. So I didn't know if Cynthia wanted to say any words or Matt, anything else. And again, we'll send for questions.
I'll start with Alderman Hartman since he's virtual.
Thank you, Mayor. Great job, Darren, Billing. Thank you for putting this together. Some questions specific to the contingencies you built in. 20% contingency and an escalation clause of 6 to 8% each year. Do you feel, and I know this is a loaded question, but do you feel like that is a reasonable or conservative estimate as we plan? I know a lot of things can change. They have in the last 2 years as we've looked at quantities and numbers for a residential subdivision we're getting ready to fire up. But I just want to hear from you kind of your thoughts on that. And then I agree wholeheartedly, Mayor, that I think we need to get started on the design of this. And I think we need to set an example for developers and others that come into the city. If we're going to require them to do, street improvements and curbs and gutters and water lines, I think we should set an example as a city. So those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so addressing the contingencies and escalations, the contingency is something we do no matter what project it is, no matter what the climate is. That's just what we do in terms of schematic design. It goes down to 15% in design development. It goes down to 10% during construction documents. And by the end of construction documents is where it hits that 5% mark, which is where we leave all of our projects. So that's standard for WSKF. The escalation portion of that is, I hate to say this, but that's our professional opinion, but it's anybody's guess what this market's going to do. What items are going to be hard to get when we are ready to build this. But I will say that something that we're constantly looking at is what is the current market doing? We've got another project that we purposely chose a structural system we knew we could get the material for on a timely basis, instead of doing like bar joists and metal deck, which you can't find right now because Amazon and everybody's doing all these crazy things. We're finding systems that can be found locally or can be found at a decent time thing. So that's something that we'll be constantly watching as we do. We try our best to make the money go as far as it can because none of our clients have unlimited amounts of money. We work with a lot of public entities like you guys. And so that's something we want to do, but and we could raise the escalation rate if that makes you feel more comfortable, but 6% is a pretty good rate at this point. And then again, 6% for every year we're going forward. So again, if you were to space these phases out, you're going to have to add additional escalation costs to cover when you would do those additional phases. But it's in our professional opinion that this is where we should be at in terms of numbering. Yep. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate you elaborating on that and specifically about some of the construction materials and costs, because it is tough and a lot of experts don't believe it's not going to get any better this year or next year. So I appreciate that work ahead of time.
Yep, no problem.
And I do appreciate, for those of you that don't know, Dalen does live here in the community. Her kids are in Parks and Rec. I ran into her at the Candyland Quest, and she's going to keep that in mind, that she's going to be one of those parents picking up equipment and participating because she has some young kids in the community here. So I appreciate you looking out for those things in this project. What questions are in the room? Alderman Smith.
So I'm coming in just kind of in the middle of this, so to speak. But I'm just curious, do we have, it's 7.4 million, I think was the first phase. So do we have that budget in reserve now, or where's that coming from?
Not currently, no. We would have to look at financing options for a project like this.
How would that, curious how that would be financed, or what options would there be?
I think Cynthia and Stephen are both available, but we would have to, depending on the board direction on what kind of facility we'd be looking at, they'd have to provide what our revenues look like and our bonding options would look like. And how
I could
fast
jump
we'd want to
in.
build it. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, Mayor, if I could just expand on what you had indicated there, Rand, one of the things that we do look at as we put the budget together are plans like this so that we can start making projections about what our revenues look like and what those needs are to help us with capital project funding over time. And as you all as a governing body and we as staff progress through the budget process, we will be putting together those lists of needs and looking at those revenue sources. And one of the things that we'll need to be looking at as we move into that budget year, we'll have a board retreat where we're looking at priorities. And so we wanted to get information to you all as soon as possible, what those needs are over the next several years so we can start planning and bringing options for that forward.
Yeah, and just so everyone's aware on timeline, our board retreats typically in May, initial budget discussion, July, August, board adopts the budget before the end of October because our fiscal year starts November 1. So we have to get this information to the board early so we can make those informed decisions for that budget process.
Right, and if I'll jump in even a little bit before that May timeframe, staff is working internally on things like that. This project, putting together needs that we have for the coming year, but then also for the next several years from a capital improvement standpoint, and monitoring revenues and seeing where we stand on that. We provide on a quarterly basis an update to the governing body on those revenues. So we're working throughout the year on bringing that information forward that we really work intensively on over the summer. I hope that answers your question, Alderman Smith.
Certainly does. Thank you very much.
I truly do appreciate that you guys looked at the Parks Master Plan too and looked at that meeting room space and parking and the water line extension and the sewer improvements, because we do have a lot in that master plan around expanded concession facilities, bathrooms, baseball fields, soccer fields. It all takes water and sewer, right, Matt? What other questions in the room? This is a work session. If anybody out in the general audience has questions too, don't be shy to ask. Yes, sir.
Question, excuse me, Ron Russell, 205 Lakeview Drive, our subdivision.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a question, I apologize, I haven't read the scope of the RFP, but were there plans on the facility for any type of fueling or light maintenance of company vehicles? And the second part of the question is the drainage, does it go directly to the lake? Thank you.
Service is mostly going to be handled in the existing Parks and Rec facility, which is in phase 2 to renovate that so they can have a better service bay and then a wash bay. So they're currently doing some servicing out there. And we are continuing to provide that service out there, whereas the main building is mostly for storage. And I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I noticed also one of the alternatives was a welding hood, which I know Matt's guys are doing quite a bit of out there too.
So, yeah, we currently have fueling tanks out there. So they will remain. We do have stormwater detention. It's being directed into a catch basin for basically any of our salt runoff. We talked about like help me out, Darren. No. Bioswale. Yes, we talked about bioswales so we could, treat anything that runs off the site before it gets, but it does not run into the lake. We're on the downside stream of the lake, so it does not run into the lake. So if we do some bioswales and we do some sediment traps and some oil and grease separators and stuff like that coming off the site, that stuff will have to be cleaned out and hauled away, but it's not unlike any other place like that. But we want to fit in. You can see from the architectural rendering that we've got pros and cons on, Linda. But anyway, it's green and brown. It kind of fits into that park and rec feel. It's not an industrial type building. We don't want it to be. And with some landscaping and some berming, we're gonna try and hide the maintenance part of this as much as possible. And that's why the building's facing the park area. We looked at one point facing DD, and then we'd have the whole yard. Have the whole yard like it sits now, it runs down along the park road, and you can see everything in there. We looked at that initially and we thought, well, let's try and hide some of that from the park. You'll never hide it from the dam because you're always going to be looking into it, but with some landscaping and stuff, we can make it look attractive. Does that answer the question?
I think so. The answer is yes, right? I mean, as far as.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, great question. So those details will be fleshed out even further in the next couple of steps, but we did take that into account in terms of thinking about, like Chuck mentioned, the bioswales for cleansing of the stormwater, the sediment traps for if there was a spill, that all needs to be taken into account when you do design for good practices. So yes, all of that has been thought about through the design. Good question, though.
Let me guess, Linda wanted more cedar and dark blues.
We did look at quite a few different color options that are available still. We're very much in schematic design. Even the document you saw, the renderings of the building, there's no landscaping that it's very schematic. So I want you to kind of think of the, broad kind of schematic thought, not we're down to the weeds. We're not at that level yet.
I'm just gonna jump in again.
Yep.
From an environmental perspective, all this is gonna be approved by the Corps. There's not gonna be anything that's gonna be environmentally unfriendly. The Corps is gonna have to approve this. So they're not gonna let us go in there with something that they don't approve.
And just so anyone's not aware, or hasn't toured the current facility, it's just next to our reservoir and is built in the 60s, 70s,
Yeah.
when they didn't have near the standards. And it literally is 10 feet from our reservoir. So, yes, sir.
Chris Palmer, 4325 Loveland Road. The question I have is, and by the way, you got a winner there. Love him. So keep him around as much as possible.
I've been trying to.
Yeah, worked with them for Park and Rec. So the question I have is that all my kids play competitive ball. And what I'm seeing is infrastructure for a city, which I think is necessary. But what are we doing with the fields? Because almost everybody's going to play competitive ball now. Park and Rec is, I hate to say, it's kind of dying. So how is this going to help our city long-term in the way of bringing in revenue? If we're building this, but we're not improving our fields, and these kids are going to play their ball at Blue Valley or going to Kansas, because I spent most of my times on the Kansas side, spending a lot of money watching my kids play sports.
Linda, can you go back to slide 5?
Are we looking at potentially bringing in competitive tournaments in the Smithville then with this upgrade?
So we had about 1,000 people participate in the Parks and Rec master planning process for the next 10 years. And Smith's Fork has been identified as the place for that type of facility. So if you notice on here, we're converting the 2 existing baseball fields to a cloverleaf with concession scoreboard to give us that opportunity. As you can see how that fits in here, that's about what we can fit in there. The rest of that land, they're in yellow that we can't build on, right, Matt? The big yellow section, that's Indian burial ground. We can't touch it.
Okay.
The pond there, we can't do much there, but those 4 baseball fields and the additional soccer fields is about the maximum capacity for this area. That's what the 10-year plan is for this park.
Have you looked at heritage at all and see what you can do to expand?
Yeah, it was part of the plan as well. It's a pretty extensive document. Matt, can you get him a copy of it? Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I just think I'm all for, I think Smithville has a great location. I can tell you on the Missouri side, there's not a lot of opportunities except for Tiffany and Fountain. And if you work with a Triple USA or something, some rep to bring tournaments to Missouri, or excuse me, to Smithville. I mean, anybody who has kids that play competitive sports will tell you there's hundreds, if not thousands of spectators there watching. They spend all day at the field. That means they're going to bring money into the city. So I just think that this is great, but hopefully we're looking long-term at how we can utilize this into bringing up revenue into the city. So, all right, thank you.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you.
And if I can help elaborate on that. So I just had a meeting with Cynthia and Stephen just last week, and the funding for the Parks Master Plan, especially with the the ball fields is kind of in a separate fund. So we're currently saving through the Parks and Stormwater sales tax for this project. So hopefully in the next, 5 to 10 years, we will have a significant amount of funds to start getting that stuff together. So looking at kind of the parks improvements kind of in a separate funding source rather than the building would be kind of something to have to discuss and go further. And so we are
Yeah.
planning for that future.
And on the competitive soccer side, just on the southern border, they're building a 12-field competitive facility for soccer, and the 597 plan is planning on doing some sort of competitive baseball facility that'll be within 10 miles of here. So there'll be plenty of opportunities in Northland for rec and
So
competitive.
as you plan, the opportunities are kind of endless on what we could do with having more staffing and could put together some different events and things like that. So.
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Other questions, comments? Anything anybody wants to change? You guys good with the plan?
I'd like to see a bathroom closer to the main entrance.
Well, I think that part of this building would have those restrooms be public in the public lobby area. So that would give us one closer to the soccer fields, because this would be directly across for those, correct, Matt? Okay. To give you something a little bit closer. Yep.
Mayor, so my understanding is we're soliciting feedback from us specific to if we should move forward in the engineering, the design of the facility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'd like to make the recommendation that we move forward for that, especially with the Chuck mentioned the fact that it takes a little bit of time to get through the Army Corps of Engineers real estate process. I think if we begin to plan, I think it's just smart to head towards this direction. That's my opinion.
Is everyone else good with that? Okay, Cynthia, everyone in the room is nodding their heads in agreement, so I think you have your direction.
Terrific. Thank you all.
All righty. Well, we got 10 minutes till the next meeting starts.
One more thing, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
Before we leave, I need to thank Alan and his crews for this weekend for the work they did. I think the street snow removal process went well this weekend. And it's due to gentlemen like Alan and a handful of guys basically that get out. When did you get out? 5 o'clock? 5:30 on Saturday. They were hitting the road. So good job.
Yeah, great work. We appreciate it. Matt, I saw Chase and others out there with the cat hauling snow out of the parking spaces too in downtown. So I did only get one little complaint and that was it. So I think we're good. Did they? So Chuck, did you hear that? John said the contractors did good too in his neighborhood. So,
That seems to be working well.
okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the work session.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Say no. Stand adjourned. See you at 7.
No,